DX Central, because we're all about radio.
For DX Central, Lloyd Van Horn here in the shack this evening, and we're doing a little bit of an analysis. Sometimes when we're doing DX, we have a station, and we receive that station, and we have a lot of information about what we're receiving, but we don't have an ID. And sometimes, if it's a really weak station, we may not even have discernible audio that we can say, okay, they were doing religious programming, or they were doing a talk show, or news, or whatever. We may not even have that. So what we're going to talk about tonight in our Aircheck analysis here is we're going to lay out a case that I have received 1476 kilohertz from the country of Benin in Africa, TransWorld radio station. We're going to present all of the evidence and then leave it up to you, our wonderful viewers, our YouTube followers, to determine, what do you think? Do you think we have Benin added to the logbook or no? So we're going to start by going over here into our SDR program. This is the Jaguar SDR program, which is tethered to the Perseus SDR. So if you have a Perseus SDR, this Jaguar program that you see in front of you here is something that you can use. If you don't have a Perseus, the Jaguar only works with the Perseus. So a little bit of a rundown on the setup of what we have here. We are running, again, the Perseus SDR, Jaguar Pro software. I am running my Eastern, we'll call it Eastern, 70 degrees, Eastern 22 by 65 foot CAS antenna. You've probably seen me talk quite a bit on Twitter at DX Central, or here on the YouTube channel about the CAS antenna. I have a video you can actually check out so you can see how we constructed the CAS antenna that we're talking about here, this 22 by 65 antenna. So it's pointing roughly 70 degrees. Why is that important? So let's start looking at some of the facts of our case here. I'm going to start off by talking about where I'm located. I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina, as you can see on our map, right in this little area right where our little dot is on the coastline. So we're about 10, 12 miles inland from the actual saltwater amplifier that we call the Atlantic Ocean. Why is that important? Because the closer you are to the saltwater amplifier, the ocean, the stronger those signals from across the ocean will be. So I'm relatively close to the ocean. If I was on the beach, we'd be having a completely different discussion. I would probably have very clear audio, but I'm about 10, 12 miles inland. Another thing you're going to notice here, this is the actual recording in question. This is from July 2nd at 4:31 UTC, which is about 12:31 Eastern Daylight Time in the morning after midnight. Why is that important? Because I'm in darkness. I have no sunshine, obviously, anywhere around me. The terminator for sunset is here up in British Columbia, making a beeline for Alaska and all parts west. So from my standpoint here, though, I'm in a total darkness path where I am. That's about to come into a lot of importance here in a second, because let's take a look and see what is on 1476 kilohertz. There's not a lot. If we look at the continent of Europe, we have a couple of stations here in Europe. We have a station in Great Britain, which runs about 250 watts, Radio Colville, and it is about 44 degrees from me on azimuth. So it's well north of my 70-degree CAS antenna. Now, I do receive stations from England on that antenna during, prime transatlantic conditions in the wintertime. But I don't receive much of that this time of the year. And when I do, it's their larger ones, the mega kilowatt stations that they have, like TalkSport and things like that. So 250 watts across the ocean this time of the year would be a little tricky. Also, there at this point, you can see at 4:31 UTC, they're in daylight. They have now crossed into daylight. The sunrise terminator here is just off the coast of Ireland. So as that pulls away from England here, our conditions of skywave signal dramatically drop out of England towards me. The other station that we have here is even further inland. At 46 degrees, it is a station in Austria. I'm not even going to try to pronounce, I guess, museums radio. Okay, I'll try to pronounce it. Give it a shot. 46 degrees, 400 watts. Okay, so could it be either one of these? Anything is possible, but it's highly unlikely that either of these two stations would be the station that I'm hearing on 1476 for a couple of reasons. One, they're north of my beam width of my antenna, which doesn't put them out of the realm of possibility, but the further away you get from that center of that beam width, the more power you're going to need and the more signal you're going to need to get into that CAS antenna. Here we have two relatively low power stations, under 500 watts for both of them, and they're in current daylight. So that's going to kill their signal even further, on top of them being lower powered stations. Okay. Then we have, let's go to Asia. There's quite a few stations here in Asia, quite a few in China. We have one in Thailand that's a 50 kilowatt station. We have one here in Iran that's about 20 kilowatts. You have another one here there's two in China at 10 kilowatt. And let's see, is that one in Turkmenistan at 10 kilowatt? So yeah, you've got some stations here scattered around Asia, some 10K and above, maxing out at 50K when we get to Thailand. A couple of problems here. They're all in daylight, okay? If we have trans-Pacific, if we have trans-Pacific conditions here in the United States, they typically come in the morning, and they're going to be on that most eastern end of Asia, Japan, the Koreas, the South Pacific, things along those lines. Also, for me to get any of these, you see here, we have this station. So let me go back to the bigger ones. Our Thailand station, it would be across the pole at 1 degree. This time of the year, across the pole, not very good because we have a light path, not a darkness path. We have a light path across the pole for me here. So into any of these in Asia, I would either have to be riding the gray line, which is not happening here because the gray line is still to the east over here on its way back over for a sunset. I have to either be riding the gray line or have a darkness path across the pole. Don't have either of those going on here. So Asia, very unlikely, extremely unlikely that that's what we're hearing here in Charleston, South Carolina. Okay. Oceania, there are a couple of stations here. There's a 2 kilowatt and a 1 kilowatt. Again, they're a little more likely only on the premise that they're closer to the gray line, but they're extreme low power. You need some significant power to get from this location here in the South Pacific in Australia down under up to my location. And again, that would most likely be in the morning. Okay. So sunrise. And typically that's going to happen more in the winter time when those gray lines kind of align. So is it out of the realm of possibility that this is the two stations in here in Australia? Highly unlikely, but I can't rule it out entirely. Okay. So we've looked at that. There's nothing in North America. There's nothing in Central or South America. So that brings us, we looked at Oceania, we looked at Europe, we looked at Asia. Let's look at Africa. We have two stations in Africa that could be our station that we're hearing here on 1476, where you see this nice signal peak right here on this carrier. One of them is in Egypt. Okay, it's a 10 kilowatt station in Egypt, and the offset for that particular radio station is at 1475.997. So it's on the lower sideband side of the 1476 main frequency that we're looking at here. The other station is TransWorld Radio Bonaire. By the way, that Egyptian station is sitting right at 55 degrees from my location. So a little bit north of 70 degrees off of my CAS antenna. That brings me to TransWorld Radio Benin. They're sitting at 85 degrees. Okay, so that's within 15 degrees, roughly, is within the beam width. So that 55 is within my beam width, but so is this Benin. Now you'll notice that Egypt is in daytime. They're well past our sunrise, our terminator line here. Benin is still in the darkness path. So I have a complete darkness path between myself in Charleston and Benin. As you can see here on the map, this line between us, there's nothing but darkness between us. So that bodes well to this being Benin, is that I have a darkness path. I have them within the beam width of my antenna, okay? And they're a 100 kilowatt station. So they're throwing some energy at me. They're not a coastal African station. They're a little bit further inland. However, when you look at these options that could be here, other than maybe the British station here, that 250 watts, this is the closest I can get to a saltwater path between us. So I have about 10, 12 miles between me and saltwater. They have a little bit more, obviously. They're a little further inland, but there's some salt water here, and we have the ocean here. So they're a little bit closer to me in a saltwater path than any of these other stations we've looked at, okay? So from purely a geographical and an atmospheric perspective, we're looking at daylight, we're looking at location, we're looking at power. From those three things, right now, TransWorld Radio Benin is our best option to explain who it is that I'm hearing here on 1476. To my knowledge, and to medium wave list and the turtle database here in Jaguar, there's no other options. Okay, we looked at the Asians, we looked at the oceanic options. None of those are plausible because of the daylight path, the relatively low power, and location, and especially location in relation to my antenna. This one is in darkness path, has the power to get across the water. It's close enough to the water, right, that a lot of that signal should be able to make it kind of across these countries here in Africa and over to where I am here in Charleston, right? So you kind of look, if we look at that path between us, look at the, let me kind of move my camera here so you can kind of see what I'm pointing out here. So you see here this path between, here's the coast of Africa, here's Benin right here. That is the path. So if it can survive this trek across land, then once it gets out here over open water, kind of like you think about hurricanes, right? When they come off the African coast, once they get out over open water, they can carry much, much further. So that's what we're kind of looking at here. Kind of a similar mindset, is if we can get as much of that signal off the African coast as we can, we, in theory, should be able to hear that here because this is going to go right across the ocean on that saltwater amplifier. So that's our first series of evidence. So now let's look at our next series. This is the actual signal that we're hearing. And you're going to notice right now that carrier is sitting at 1476.0016. Now, the reported carrier for Benin is 1476.0025. So within a margin of error here, that this is very, very close to the reported frequency. There could be some calibration errors, and there also can be some drift to these offsets a bit. Anywhere from about, in this case, 1476.004 to about 0025 or so. The main thing to know is when it is offset, it's on the upper sideband side of that carrier. Where we saw some of those others was on the lower sideband. And you do see a very faint trace right here. You see that little blue? Let me blow this up a little bit for you. Do you see that little faint blue trace right there? I'm going to point it out here again on my camera. Right about in here. Let me go full screen here. So right about in here, you're going to see, you see that little blue trace right there? that could be one of those other stations we looked at. It's very, very weak. There's obviously no audio. It's not registering a carrier here on my bottom of my spectrum analyzer with my waveforms. It's just showing up as a very, very faint trace on the waterfall itself. We have a nice trace that looks right in here. There's some peaks of reds in here. Okay, it's a little broken up, which means it's not a solid signal. But what I'm about to present to you here, again, this is on the upper sideband side of 1476, which is where I would expect to see the Benin offset. You're going to hear some audio here in a moment. We're going to play some audio. This is around 431 UTC on the second. The audio is, I don't think it's discernible from my ears. I can't tell what they're saying. I can't tell if it's in English or not. I can't tell if it's religious content, which is what I would expect to hear on TransWorld Radio, or if it's some other content like news reading or call-in chat show, whatever it might be. I can't tell. I can tell you that there is audio. I can hear him. I think at times, I can't remember if it's this clip or not, there's a man talking and I think a female talking as well. This might be this clip if I'm thinking of the right one, a female talking. Earlier parts, I'd heard a little bit of faint hint of music in there, but again, very weak audio coming over. So you tell me what you think. We're going to play this clip and then we're going to come back. All right, so I'm going to pause it there. So there were a handful of times where you can kind of hear the mumbling audio in there. It wasn't very distinct. There were a couple of times where you had some peaks occurring. It sounded like a female talking, could also be a high-pitched male, in all fairness, obviously. And one particular one was right here at the about 432.50 or so. So let me go back to that spot and play that again for you right in here. We'll do it right here from 40 on. All right, so right there around 432.55 is probably the closest I have heard in this entire recording that I did, from about 4:20 UTC until after 5:30 UTC. So about an hour, a little over an hour, when I was receiving them on the second here. That was probably the clearest moment of audio right there at 432.55-ish, especially that whole span between about 432.40 and 432.55 was the clearest that I remember hearing, especially there towards the end. So I can't really pull any audio details out there, obviously, from a language standpoint, from a content standpoint even. So from a traditional putting something in my logbook, I like to, even if I can't hear an IED, I need to have enough evidence to support that that's who I've heard. And so I like to have some sort of programming content that I can talk about in that to say it was TransWorld radios who I was chasing and I heard religious discussions, right? I like to be able to have that. If I don't have that, I don't feel as good about the logging. However, some of the other factors here that are kind of extenuating factors really kind of lean me towards more putting this in the logbook and kind of presenting my case here in this video. So again, we have a station in TransWorld Radio Benin on 1476 that is in the right location within my beam width of my kind of core beam width of my CAS antenna, which is at 70 degrees, and this is at 85. It's on that end of the continent of Africa, on the western side, so that it's closer to the ocean where I'm located here on the east coast of the U.S., just inland, right? It's closer to the ocean than, say, the Egyptian station would be at 10 kilowatts, which, you know, that bodes well to the signal being able to get to me. It's a 100 kilowatt station. It's the strongest signal on this frequency, bar none. The closest is a 50 kilowatt in Thailand, but I have to go across the pole to get to them, and that puts me in daylight. Speaking of daylight, I have a darkness path to Benin. It's the only radio station at this moment in time at 4:32 UTC. This is the only radio station in the world that I have a darkness path to is Benin. All other radio stations on this frequency around the rest of the earth are in daylight. This is literally the only station where I have a darkness to darkness path between me and my receiving location and the station and the transmitting location. This is it. Benin is it. We have audio directly on here. This is not audio that we're hearing splatter from 14.6 or 1470 or 1480. This is direct audio on that frequency, on 1476. Okay, this is zero beated into that 1476.0016, 0021, somewhere in there. That's where the audio is transmitting at. This is not bleed over from one of the adjacent frequencies here in the US. That is on freak. We have a offset, a carrier offset on the upper side of 1476, which is where I expect to see Benin. It is, when I look at all the other offsets, the Egyptian would be expect to see at or below on the lower sideband side. Same thing with the Austrian, at or below. Now, the British station is in the same relative area as far as offsets go, but again, it's only 250 watts, and they're in daylight at this moment in time, okay? From an Asian station standpoint, there's not a lot of details here, but it looks like quite a few of these are offset. There's one below, there's one that's way below. I don't know where that 1469 is coming from. 1476.255, so that's way up from where we are, right? That's way up from where we are, that 20K station that I ran. This one's dead center here in Thailand. It's a little closer too. So it could, from an offset, purely offset standpoint, Thailand would be somewhere in this general area is where I would expect to see Thailand, right in here, between where I see my current offset from suspected Benin to the center frequency right here. This is where I would expect to see Thailand. You see there's nothing there. Okay, there's nothing in that gap right there. There's a tiny, weak signature for a little bit right here at about 14.75.994-ish. Okay. And then you've got this. You've got the main signal at 1476.0016 to about 0021-ish. And remember, the Benin signal is sitting at 1476.0025 is the reported frequency for Benin. The Australians, you have one below and one pretty close zero beating on 1476. Same kind of case as the Thailand station. I would expect to see it closer to this line over here in the middle. There's nothing North America, Central America, or South America on frequency. So when we present the evidence, this station is in the right location. It's in my antenna path. It has the power to get here. If one thing I will say from a format content standpoint, right? Even though I have no discernible audio that I can tell what they're saying to be able to say, oh, that's religious or news or whatever. It's a religious station and there's talking. I would expect to hear talking on a religious station, sermons, preaching, passing the good word, whatever you want to call it. I would expect to hear that. Maybe some music, maybe, but I would also expect to hear a lot of message, right? And I have that here. I have 8 minutes of talking on this entire little window that we have here. I have 8 minutes of talking. So there's that. There's a darkness path. It's the right time. And here's the final kicker. Here's the final little piece of evidence for you. I'm going to fast forward my time to 5:29. Okay, so we're at 5:29 UTC, 5:29 and 46 seconds. You see that we still have a signal in here. It's not as strong as it was. It's a little bit weaker, but we have right here at the tippity top, there's a little tiny little orange glow you can see that's coming in. So what we're going to do now is we're going to play this for a couple of moments, and we're going to look to see if that waterfall signature line continues much past 5:30 UTC. The reason for that is this particular station is known to sign off right around 5:30 UTC, give or take a minute or so. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I've got a signal here in this area. It's gotten a lot weaker than it was. But you see there's a tiny bit of yellow right in here. It's going to carry it all the way down into this little mucky area. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit here. Enough to give you a visual. There's something right here, right? There's a signature occurring right where that peak is. So this isn't just a peak. There's something there. Now it's 5:30 and 51. I would expect at this point we're going to lose the signal. And there it goes. It's kind of in and out a little bit here. Okay, let me pause it right there. So we can see a very weak signature in here. Let me go ahead and fast forward this a bit to the next. All right, so pay attention to this circle here. It's now 5:32 UTC. This circle that's right here, pay attention to that. Do we see anything coming down the waterfall? You can have these little peaks that occur here. But do we have any audible content? Even if it could be a carrier, They may have left the carrier on the transmitter, but do we have any audio, any audible waterfall signature coming down the pipeline? And there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing there. So it's now 3 minutes after the reported sign-off time. And they probably signed off before this, but we started here at 5:32. There's nothing there. So because there's nothing there, there's no audio there anymore, right? There's no more transmitted audio happening. And that's in conjunction with the reported and known sign-off time of the station. So that's kind of the kicker for me. This was also happening on 1566 Benin TransWorld radio. They were signing off around 0505 UTC. At 0506, man, they dropped. And you could see it. It was just nothing. Same thing here. We probably were signing off a little earlier when the waterfall was down here in my waveforms, but right around 5:30. However, we see no audio coming back right after the reported and known sign-off time of the station, and then all the other stuff we've already said. So that's why I think what we have here is a pretty clear-cut case that while I don't have any actual discernible audio, I have audio, I have human beings talking, and I can tell that at one point, I'd say it's probably 90% that was a female human talking. So we have a human talking on a station, on a frequency where a station exists that we know talking to happen on, okay, as a main format. It's not like I wasn't listening to top 40 music here, right? There was no Justin Timberlake popping in or Dua Lipa or any of that kind of stuff, right? I've been listening to a lot of FM stations lately. So there was none of that. It was purely talking, which is what I'd expect to hear on a TransWorld radio, right? Like you hear on TransWorld Radio Bonaire. I couldn't tell if it was English or not, but that's besides the point. And then all those other factors we already talked about. So what we want now is for you to leave your opinion in the comments down below. Tell us, do you think this station is Benin, Africa, TransWorld Radio? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this video to be helpful for you in your own pursuits, maybe how you can logically listen to some of these and be able to build your own case when you're trying to get an ID when you have less than favorable conditions, you know what to do. And don't forget, you can also follow us on Twitter. It's twitter.com/DXCentral. You can keep up with all of our exploits that we do when we're DXing, whether it's FMDX during the FMDX season like we're doing right now, some of this AM stuff that we're doing, our live streams, when we post new videos to the channel, all that kind of stuff. That's where we communicate and announce everything is on the Twitter feed. So be sure to go to twitter.com/DXCentral and give us a follow so you can keep track of all the cool stuff that we do here. And as you saw in the video a second ago, be sure to like, comment below, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Click the bell icon so you can be notified when new videos are available. And I, in this particular case, am really interested in hearing your opinion on what you think we have heard here. Do we have a compelling case? Have we, if this was a legal case, are we guilty of hearing them or not guilty of hearing Benin? What do you think? Have we, as the prosecutor here, have we built enough of a case to say, yes, that's Benin, or no? Let us know in the comments down below. As always, my friends, hopefully this video has been helpful for you, because we try to help out as much as possible here in the DX community, pressing information out, sharing tips, tricks, things along those lines. So hopefully you can add new stations into your log. Because let me tell you what, that is a great feeling, right? When you have that, especially in a situation like this. If I can build my case here sufficiently to prove that I've heard Benin, even without an ID or even readable audio, to be able to go in and add them to the log, not just add them to the log, but add a new country to the logbook. I want to celebrate. That's what I want to do. I want to have a celebration of me putting a new country in the logbook, and I want to help share what I've learned. That was cheesy as hell. I want to share what I've learned over the years to help me do that with you, so that hopefully you can do the same thing, and you can be celebrating a new country, a new state, a new logged station, whatever it might be. So we like to have fun over here. All right, my friends, take care. 73, best of DX. We'll catch you next time right here at DX Central.